Untangled Viners, welcome back to another Future of Work weekly report. This week we're going to be talking about 3 articles. We have one from Forbes, we have one from the New York Times, and then we have the last one from Insights. Now, this Future of Work weekly report, 2 articles are going to focus on the trending and current topics of the future of work. As always, we're going to give our insights where hopefully you can apply what you learn here into your own organization. And then in some cases, we'll talk about how Grapevine can solve some of these challenges or some of these trending topics. Now, the last article, it's still going to be on the future of work, but we're going to be diving into Doist article from Forbes on 10 communication tips and how they approach that. The reason that I wanted to do that one for this weekly report is because I think that it can showcase how Doist uses their clear communication approach and operating asynchronously first, just to give you an idea of how the future of work could work for your specific environment. So if you are excited, like we are as always, to begin the weekly report, then go ahead and smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. I have become that person now. We want to keep those numbers going up so we can provide more and more value to each person that listens. But before we get started, let's go ahead and hit them with the intro. All right, so as promised, here we go. We're going to go ahead and start with the first article. The first article is from New York Times. The title is Who Still Works From Home? Now, I wanted to do this one because, one, it's one of the coolest articles that I've ever seen. It's just, you got to see it. I'll put it in the notes description, but check it out for yourself, because as you scroll, the graphs change, the information continues to be provided. But let's go ahead and dive into the key takeaways from this article. So the first bullet point that we're going to be talking about is shift to hybrid work. Now, this isn't a surprise. I think that we're seeing this become more acceptable. We heard a lot of return to office by the end of 2023, and then now we're in that state where the delusion of the CEOs are kind of subsiding. But let's go ahead and look at this bullet point. So the transition to hybrid work has been gradual since the onset of the pandemic, with approximately 1/10 of workers adopting a combination of in-office and remote work, while a similar portion works entirely remotely. I took an extra note here. So as you explore the article, they talk about, and I think this might just be the US, double check me on that, but approximately, according to their study, 115 million people were in office 100% of the time. Approximately 14 million identified as hybrid. And then approximately 15 million were fully remote. Now, some people can look at that and say, well, the majority of people are still in the office. Yes, but one of the things to call out here is that number, or those numbers combined, hybrid and remote, before the pandemic were significantly lower. I know that Nick Bloom and some of the other colleagues that he works with just put out a report saying that post-pandemic, the number of hybrid and fully remote companies are higher than they were before the pandemic. So that shows a trending curve saying that we are moving in that direction of everything shifting, right? So this is just the beginning, right? A lot of people talk about the pandemic as the beginning. I think right now we are in the beginning stages of that full shift into flexible work, into hybrid work. And so I wanted to call that out before we go to the next bullet point. And what I like about this article is it really breaks down certain things. So we just talked about the differences or the ratios of in-office, hybrid, and remote. Now we're going to go into demographics. And then as we continuously go down these bullet points, we're going to go into racial disparities, age, and gender, and then impact on disabled workers. So let's get back to demographic disparities. This is what they say in the article, or this is my takeaway. Workers engaging in remote or hybrid work tend to be more educated, white, and Asian compared to the broader workforce. While workers with no college education form the largest group overall, remote work is predominantly a luxury for highly educated individuals. Some people could look at that as, well, it depends on who you are and what type of person you are. You could look at that as oh, that's a great thing. I'm white, I'm a male, I have the luxury to do this. Or we could look at it as there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to close this gap. Because what this is actually calling out is not the disparities in remote or hybrid work, but it's actually calling out a larger disparity, which is the socioeconomic portion of it, the disparities in race, which is what we're going to talk about in the next bullet point. So let me go ahead and read that one and see if we can tie it together. So along with demographic disparities, this is racial disparities. White and Asian workers are overrepresented in remote work, reflecting racial inequalities in the workforce. This is attributed to the types of jobs held, with white and Asian workers more likely to have office jobs conducive to remote work. And then I added this bullet point directly from the article because I thought it was important. So it says, because white and Asian workers are more likely to hold office jobs, they are more likely to have the opportunity to work remotely, part or all of the time. Black and Hispanic workers, meanwhile, more frequently hold jobs in food service, construction, retail, healthcare, and other fields that require them to be in person. The reason that I want to tie these two together is because they're kind of similar of the greater societal issues that we have, at least in America. And so whenever we look at race, right, the different demographics, so white and Asian have a more likelihood of graduating college, or graduating high school, graduating college, or actually going to higher education compared to blacks and Hispanics, right? Those are the reports that I've seen. If there's any conflicting data out there, feel free to send it our way. We like to question ourselves and make sure that we're thinking about everything appropriately or getting different perspectives. So drop it in the comments. Let everybody see it, because I want to see that too. But that tells us that even before workers get into the workplace, we have to start thinking about how can we improve that side of it, right? It's an ecosystem. Because if we think about this, if remote work is a luxury to people who have higher education, then we need to do certain things about this to give other racial or other races opposed to white and Asians the opportunity to take advantage of remote and hybrid work. So I would say we start there. Right? Now we can do it simultaneously because we're not going to do it in a linear fashion. That's not how change works, right? Now on the other side of it is I think about a company like Amazon, and you can love them, you can hate them. I think that their story is very inspiring. It's motivational to someone like me, but this is a key example of an organization that could allow people who maybe they don't have the same opportunities as someone who looks like me, give or take, or whatever the background is or how I was brought up or anything like that, right? Amazon could start you in a warehouse position, And then they have growth opportunities. So it's almost like a blue collar university is the way maybe I would describe it, where you can come in and be a factory worker, a warehouse worker, and then take advantage of Amazon's benefits. I know one of the commercials that I've seen from them is somebody started off as a warehouse worker, maybe packaging boxes or helping get them ready to ship out. And then they took a course to become a data, I think it was like an input, data, I shouldn't have done it because now I don't know the title, but a data entry person. And that got them into the white collar position. Right now, they could do that job anywhere in the world, right? If Amazon allows them to, which I think they have a decent policy there. But maybe that's how we start thinking about this, right? Is if we have certain areas where we can make improvements, how can we do that and give more minorities a chance to climb up the ladder in different forms? Because let's say that for whatever reason, and it's not just minorities, there's a lot of people out there that are like this. Like, let's say for whatever reason, they didn't graduate high school, right? And they had to go into the workforce due to unfortunate circumstances. That's not necessarily their fault. You know, we shouldn't punish them. Now, there's systemic racism and all that kind of stuff that we have to think about too. It's not a one and done fix it all approach. There's going to be a combination of everything that has to happen, right? Politics, systematic, education, the workplace, healthcare, like all of these things are going to have to work together for us to actually see improvement. Now, if we get there in my lifetime, that would be amazing. But at least we can start now. So if you want to have a conversation about that, reach out to me. I'm always open to have those types of conversations. But so this video doesn't go too crazy long, I'm going to continue to go on. So we've talked about the race disparities and demographics disparities. Now let's talk about the age trends. So contrary to initial assumptions, young workers are returning to in-office work at a higher rate, possibly due to the social and developmental benefits of office work. Even among college graduates, younger workers are more likely to work in the office full-time. And then I added another bullet point here directly from the article. A smaller share of Americans under 25 have completed college degrees. Many work in jobs like food service that cannot be done remotely, but that is not the whole story. Even among college graduates, workers in their 20s are more likely to be in the office full-time than their older colleagues. So I did find that a little bit surprising. I've read some other articles that mention this as well, but I think that there's a couple other factors that we have to think about here, right? So put yourself, I'm 33, almost 34 in May. And when I read this, I think back to how I was living whenever I was 25 and under, right? So a part of me, I was still like taking night classes. Another part of me, I was working in the hospital. Another part of me, I was working as a roofer in a factory. Those are things that you can't do remotely, right? So that's one thing, and they kind of mention that here. The part that they don't mention is typically, at least from my experience with my friends around that age, they're still living in apartments, and in the majority of cases, they're living with a roommate or multiple roommates. Have you tried working with have you tried working with roommates? It's a little bit difficult in the sense of if you want to be professional, you got to make sure that you have this section. Now, so I just want to throw that in there as another variable, because I know that you can't study every single thing whenever it comes to data or your studies and all that kind of stuff, but I just want to throw certain things out there. What I would like to see is what if we gave these 25 and under people a chance to work from anywhere and the office was not an option? Like, let's just play hypotheticals for a moment. We could give them a co-working space. We could allow them to go to a coffee shop and work. Or in Charlotte, we have a cool bar dog park called Skip Town. And you could go there and you work while watching a lot of dogs run around. So I would wonder, my question for this call out is it that younger workers are going into the office more to receive those perks, as they call them out, like in-person meetings with your boss or mentorship? All these things can be done remotely, but a lot of articles that I read, they talk about that. So I just wonder, what would be the outcome if it was a little bit different, or if that variable was thrown in there? Again, if you have any information on that, let me know. But basically, to summarize this so I don't confuse anyone, young workers are returning to in-office work at a higher rate, according to this study. Now let's talk about gender dynamics. So gender dynamics, women are generally more likely to work remotely, especially among college graduates. However, mothers of young children are particularly likely to take advantage of remote work opportunities, indicating the importance of flexibility in balancing work and caregiving responsibilities. Now, the article goes in a little bit deeper on this, but the thing that I wanted to call out here is we talked about demographics and age here. But whenever it comes to gender, this is actually given women a better opportunity to continuously work, even through childcare and raising children. Now, I'm a believer of equal work and like shared responsibilities in a relationship, but I'm not here to give relationship advice. But what I will say is that we still see that women are more likely to be the caretaker of the child. And so what does that mean? In a lot of cases, and I've seen this even from my own circle of friends, that means that the man is still going to work or working remotely, and the woman is taking care and having responsibility of the child. Some cases, it's that they stop working completely. In other cases, they take on an extra load, which is they have their full-time work or part-time work, either way, and then they have this whole other responsibility, or the majority responsibility, of the child, right? And so remote work is allowing women to, or empowering women to have the ability to continue to work and not have a gap in their resume. That is huge, right? So that's part of why I love remote work. In addition to this next bullet point, which is the impact on disabled workers. And before I read that bullet point, basically what I'm saying is this is important because it provides a more inclusive approach to work, right? It's not the Mad Men era anymore, right? Maybe it's the end of the Mad Men era if you watch that show. But which is good, because the rise of women and these societal impacts changing the world in a better direction. We still got a long way to go. So this last bullet point, as I mentioned, impact on disabled workers. So remote work has provided significant benefits for workers with disabilities, offering alternatives to energy-draining commutes, inaccessible office environments. Fully remote work is particularly advantageous for workers with mobility limitations, enabling greater participation in the labor market. So one, we're going to have, as a company, like if you have 100% remote, or you allow 100% remote options, then disabled workers have an advantage that they never had before. And that advantage is really closing the gap, right? And so this is what remote work and flexible work can do. It's not just a luxury, right? It is a way to become more equitable or equal. It's a way to become more inclusive. It's a way to make people who have felt outside belong. Because, and I don't know, I'm not disabled in the sense of physical, right? I have depression and anxiety, but that's mental, right? I can still walk and do all this kind of stuff. But put yourself in other people's shoes. If you're in a wheelchair, or you have that type of disability, something that is physically difficult to do, normal, quote unquote, normal task. Imagine being able to work 100% remotely. Your home, most likely in this case, depending on your level of income and ability, your home is designed for your disability. And so that means that the commute they mentioned, the inaccessible office environments, that means that you get to wake up and you get to work again, quote unquote, normal people without I was going to say microaggressions, but I don't think that's the right word. It's like these side eyes, like you don't know how to interact and all that kind of stuff, but you actually get to be and I hate using these words. I'm using this kind of ironically to prove a point, but you get to be a real person in the sense that you're not just the person who is disabled, right? You are the person who is on this Zoom call or this Figgy chat in Grapevine, and you're communicating with us. We're getting work done together, and you have a better experience as a disabled person working 100% remotely. Now, that's not for everybody, but that's how I interpreted this article. And so again, that was from the New York Times. Who still works from home? Definitely check out that article because it's a very cool article. I hope more people would do that. If I can find a way to do that, I'll do that. If you know how to do that, let me know. Okay, so now we're going to go to article number 2. And so this article is fairly short, but it's very dense. And so we're going to talk about a lot of percentages here. But this article is employees increasingly want to work for firms with a clear sense of purpose. This was actually written on St. Patrick's Day, so it's very recent. The publisher is Insights, People, Place, Technology. As always, we'll put it in the show notes. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 bullet points here. We'll try to go through them quickly. But the first bullet point is growing importance of social purpose. So whenever we say social purpose, this is what they're talking about. In the face of climate change, social justice movements, and recessions, employees prioritize employers with clear commitments to environmental sustainability, poverty alleviation, and community well-being. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read these percentages and then we'll talk about this bullet point. So 61% of employees out of this study consider the social purpose of the organization when accepting a role. Meaning they look at, does this company have a mission, vision, and core values that I believe in? And then how do those factor into environmental sustainability, poverty alleviation, and then community well-being? Now, they didn't mention community well-being as in internal community, as in the employees, or do they mean the surrounding areas or just community in general? So that's something that I would want to learn a little bit more about. The next percentage here is 45% of employees remain with companies for more than 5 years due to their social value contributions. What I want to bring up here with these 2 stats is, 1, if you don't have a social purpose or a purpose in general, you're probably losing out on a few employees, right? And as they write about this article, this is a growing trend. So If you don't have that, then you want to think about that. But I would also say don't BS it. Like, make it make sense for you. Like, for example, at Grapevine, our mission is to make work more flexible, inclusive, and fulfilling for everyone. And within that mission, the inclusivity part could capture the poverty alleviation. What was the other? It could capture community well-being, right? And then being remote first helps contribute to the environmental sustainability or the climate issues. So that's how we can tie our mission and vision and core values to this if an employee asked about it. But also, we can speak about this in our marketing materials. But again, be authentic with it, because employees can see through that, right? But look at this advantage. Look at this advantage of if you take this on. They remain with companies more than 5 years due to their social value contributions. I think that this really comes down to kind of Simon Sinek's start with why. If you can find a way to take that employee's mind and your company purpose, vision, mission, whatever it is, and connect those, you are more likely going to retain that employee for up to 5 years. That's huge. The cost of recruiting and hiring and training, the last time I checked, I think it was like $11,000 per employee, right? And that's if like you have high turnover. So really consider that, because that's a huge thing. Okay. Bullet point number 2, youth prioritizing meaningful careers. Younger generations seek careers aligned with their passions and promoting innovations. 72% of those prioritizing their employer's social purpose belong to the 18 to 35-year-old age group. Which this is in alignment with our research, where it says by 2025, the majority of employees in a company will be millennials and Gen Zers, right? And I'm a millennial. They and we are driving the need for companies to care more about their employees. And that's what they're saying here. Whenever we saw the quiet quitting, the great resignation take place, a lot of these people were saying, I reflected on what I really wanted, and it wasn't this. Right? So that tells you that people are willing to leave a position if it doesn't match or connect them to a purpose or connect with their own set of values or purpose. Now, there's one way that you can do this as a company to make sure that you get the right people on the bus, as Jim Collins would say, is during your interview process, clearly map out what it is that you are looking for in an employee. And as you're interviewing this person, make sure that you bring up these levels of expectations and what you are expecting of them specifically. Now, on the flip side, as an employee, make sure to have your own criteria, which is it sounds like that's what they're doing. But what type of purpose do you want to participate in? What are the must-haves that an employee or an employer must offer to you? One of the things that I always tell people who are interviewing or looking for that next position is you have to remember that there's two sides of this coin. And as much as they are interviewing you, you are interviewing them. So make sure that these things are covered on both fronts. And then that way you're going to retain that person from the beginning anyway. Then you have to do really good at onboarding and training, because those are key factors in retention. But from the get-go, you're starting off on a good foundation, right? I've experienced this in the negative sense, where I've been told about a company that I chose to go with, and then shortly after, I realized that what they said in the interview was not even close to what that position was or what we were going to be doing. I left that position 6 months on the dot, right? So there's a use case for you. Okay, continuing on. Social impact and responsibility, or responsible business practices. Socially responsible businesses prioritize ethical practices, transparent governance, and community engagement beyond profit. Representation and opportunity for diverse communities are crucial aspects. Only 54% of surveyed companies invest in dedicated strategies to attract talent from minority backgrounds. So I'm going to actually read the rest of these bullet points and then tie them all together. So because the video is getting a little bit long. So then we go into tokenism and authenticity. We kind of touched on authenticity. Concerns about tokenism, with 46% of employees believing their business brands are authentically purpose-driven. So 46% believe that they're authentically purpose-driven. Lack of awareness about core company values and their relation to social value among 31% of respondents. So basically 31% of respondents from this article say that they don't know what their company's core values are. In Grapevine, we have an About Us page. It talks about the purpose of your company, your vision, where you can add a video if you're the CEO or founder, the vision, the mission, and then you have core values, and you can connect those core values whenever you're shouting out people. So we'll never have that problem because we have it there, and then we have it in our operating system. Okay, and then the last bullet point here, where we're going to dive into all these challenges in diversity and inclusion. Limited representation from minority socioeconomic backgrounds on boards. So basically, the boards of people representing these companies lack representation. And then this last bullet point is lack of internal teams responsible for promoting and measuring social impact. 35% of companies analyze that. Okay, so let's tie all this together. So 54% of surveyed companies invest in dedicated strategies to attract talent from minority background, or prioritize ethical practices, transparent governance, and community engagement beyond profit. So the accumulation of these bullet points are basically saying, hey, if we work for you and your company, we want you to give a crap about people. We want you to give a crap about the environment, and we want you to be authentic in your delivery and how you operate, how you manage, how you lead, all of the above. And then we want you to focus on diversity and inclusion in a real way, not just donating to Black-owned businesses or people of color or giving an award or something like that. We want you to actually put in place something that is measurable, that we can see, that we can feel proud of, and that we can feel like we're contributing something to something bigger than us. And what's funny is, I think, like, I'm speaking from my own experience, but each time that we go into a new organization or a new job, we are so motivated and inspired because the people who we interviewed with told us that, yes, we have this purpose. This is our core values. Here we do it this way. Not in a sense of like my way or the highway, but like we care about this. One of our values is people over profits. That's not going to be good for an investor, but that's okay because that's what we care about, right? Maybe I'm getting too preachy, but I think that this should just happen. Like and I get it, right? We're in an environment where a lot of people have investors and board members and stakeholders who only care about the money. But I do think, and this is where I always get into it with certain people. If you take time to care about your people, if you take time to serve a true purpose, if you take time to measure the impact, you are going to have a better workforce that is more engaged and more productive. And what happens when you have more engaged and productive employees? Your revenue goes up, right? You focus on the people, you focus on the purpose, and you do it in a streamlined fashion that is efficient and effective, the money will follow. I know that's easier said than done, and some people have to make sacrifices, but that's my take on it. Treat your people right, treat them like adults, give them the autonomy, help them achieve mastery, and then provide them with a purpose or connect their purpose to your purpose. And you're going to have an entirely different organization for the better if you take that approach. Okay. Let's take a deep breath after that one. I feel like we went to church there. But you can see why I like doing these things. And I hope that it helps you too. Okay, so now this is the part of the video where we dive in a little bit differently than the other articles that we've done in previous episodes and the previous two that we just covered. Because this one is from Forbes, and the title is 10 Communication Standards to Enhance Distributed Teamwork. Now, this is coming specifically, I want to say it's Chase Warrington. Don't quote me on that, but you'll see it in the article. But he's very popular on LinkedIn. If you don't follow him, go ahead and connect with him or follow him. What he's doing here is he's specifically talking about how Doist and his company, his title is head of remote. He's talking about how his company specifically focuses on operating in a distributed workspace. And I should have wrote this down, but their workforce is insanely distributed. I want to say like 36 different countries. I don't even know how many different time zones that would be, but that's what he's talking about here. And so I'm going to be kind of high level and try to give you more of an overview of this article, but I know that I won't be able to help myself and I'll probably add some context. So let me just start with the 10. Okay, so asynchronous first approach, transparency by default, intentionality in communication, bias for action, radical candor, recognition of deep work, 24-hour responses, exceptional context, succinct yet thorough communication, and then action over perfection. Those are the 10 communication standards for Doist. So let's start with asynchronous first approach. Transition to asynchronous communication as the cornerstone of the communication stack. Synchronous communication reserved for social situations and necessary instances. And then their percentage breakdown said around 90% asynchronous and then 10% synchronous. Now, for those who are watching and they're not necessarily familiar with those words, synchronous means like in real time. So you think about a real-time Zoom meeting, you're communicating in that moment back and forth. That's synchronous. Asynchronous is like this video. I recorded it at a certain time. I'm actually recording this on Monday. It will go out on Wednesday. And so you might watch it on Wednesday, or you might watch it 3 months later. That's asynchronous work, right? And so what they're saying is the way that they construct their operations, they are able to work 90% asynchronously. Now, the next set of bullet points is how they do that. So, transparency by default. Predominant use of public channels ensures knowledge sharing and inclusivity. I'd like to know the tool. I think that their tool here is probably going to be Slack. The reason I'd like to know it is because Grapevine offers a better experience, at least in the form of, because channels is just real-time communication, right? And so with Grapevine, we have Figgy Chat, but then we also have our intranet, we have our community, we have human resources page, about us page. We have all these different things, information hub, that makes it a lot easier to be transparent. So, but that's what they're saying. Okay, so they use public channels ensuring knowledge sharing and inclusivity. Reserved use of private messages for personal or confidential matters. I think that this would be very tricky for a lot of companies. So one of the things that I want to call out here is that this is specific to Doist. And the reason that I'm talking about this is to show you how you take your own culture and you build a structure around it, hopefully with Grapevine as the foundation, but you build the structure around what works best for your organization, right? It's going to depend on industry, right? So think about that as we continue to go through here. Okay, intentionality in communication. Purposeful communication, considering the audience and limiting notifications. Example, directly addressing overuse of notifications in team communication. I think one of the examples that they gave in the article was somebody put at everyone or at here, where it sent out a notification to everybody. And the reason that they talk about this as being not a great thing is because of, whenever we get to this, recognizing deep work. What happens whenever you get into flow or deep work, you lose track of time, but it's because you're so focused and you're so productive because there's no distractions happening at that moment. Anytime that you get a notification, it can throw you off, right? And so that's why they're saying turn the notifications off. Or don't overuse it. Use it when it's appropriate. And a fun fact is, every time that you get out of deep work or flow, it takes you around 29 minutes to get back into flow. So think about engineering, coding, and you interrupt them. It's going to take them out of the loop, even if it's just for a split second, and then they're going to have to try to get back into deep work, which might take 30 minutes. Okay, bias for action is the next one. Encouragement of decisiveness and initiative among team members. Empowerment for making decisions within scope, fostering trust and responsibility. So with this one, encouragement of decisive and initiative. So basically what they're saying is, if you need to do something, don't necessarily ask permission, do it. So basically what they're saying is, hey, as a employer, I trust you. Make the right decision. If you don't make the right decision, we'll work it through, we'll learn from it, and then we'll move forward. Which is very, very unique for a lot of organizations. Okay, number 5. Importance of honest and direct written communication, especially in feedback. That's very important. Prioritizing empathy and assuming good intent in communication. Now this one, okay, so for the feedback, yes, you want to be very, very specific. Because if you're not specific with your feedback, it doesn't really help anybody. Like, hey, Zach, great job. Thanks. what does that mean? Instead, say, hey, Zach, great job on the win-loss report. I really like how you separated the losses that weren't in the opportunity and then the losses that were in an opportunity, as well as adding the specific reason for losses. You see how different that is? Think about that from an employee perspective. Think about that as if you're watching it and you're a manager, think about it on the flip side. If your manager gave you that feedback, you would walk away knowing, okay, that was good. Next time I'm going to do it like that too. And it's going to transcend into your other work. Because it's like, okay, they like that. Well, I can do it in this version over here. And then if you celebrate that in public and you're very specific with that, it tells other employees what you are focused on and looking for. Right? So it's a motivator. Now, the prioritizing empathy and assuming good intent in communication, the reason that I hesitated there is only because you are asking people to maybe think in a way that they are not wired for at the time right now. So what you're going to have to do here is, yes, it's like the Google don't be evil, right? What does that mean? One, so like assuming good intent in communication. One, what does that fully mean? Two, how can I coach this person to understand that better and to think about it in a positive light rather than maybe the first initial knee-jerk reaction of, oh, are they saying it this way? Especially in asynchronous work. I mean, in some cases, it's better to do a video or a voice recording instead of typing it out because now you get that tonality. Not always, but these are just things that we want to think about. Okay, recognizing deep work. So importance of deep, focused work sessions without constant interruption. Balancing deep work with social interactions for a productive work-life harmony. That's assuming. See, this is the importance. This is for their culture. That's assuming that maybe these people prefer deep work. But some people feed off of energy of other people. So how can we give these other people who might not fully enjoy deep work in this area? Like I'm thinking of salespeople, right? A lot of salespeople are introverts or maybe even ambiverts. But like, balancing deep work with social interaction. But I do get the point here because if you're balancing deep work, you're allowing employees to have that deep work. But then you're also feeding them the social interaction too. So I take back what I said kind of. But be conscious of this, right? Be specific about how you do this in your organization. And then write it down, publish it, and store it somewhere where other people can see it. Make it part of your culture. Now, up to this point, you might be wondering, how does all this work and they still have a fully functioning company? I think the answer is here. 24-hour responses. So, expectation of responses within 24 hours during the work week, irrespective of time zones. So basically what that's saying is if I reach out to you and request something of you, I want a response within 24 hours, right? And I think that that's okay if it works for you. But my question to Chase is, how does that work for a customer? Is that okay? And I don't know the answer. It's a genuine question. Is that just for internal? Or does that also work outside? Right? Which would actually bring me to question the bullet points that we're going to go through and the ones that we've already talked about is how does that work? I don't know. It's not my culture. It's not my company. So it would be interesting to hear from him. Okay, so the next one is exceptional context. Emphasis on providing comprehensive background information in communications. ensuring effective participation and decision making through over communicating context. These are almost conflicting, right? Like over communicating, but not having notifications, ensuring effective participation, but having deep work and not needing to respond until within 24 hours. Like, again, if they have clearly identified this in their organization, which I'm assuming they have, then the employees should understand what that means. But from an outside perspective, that's I would need more information here. So, but basically, I think the summary of this bullet point is communicate clearly where it doesn't allow for interpretation, or I think I read this in the article and I think it was here, or let me go to because succinct yet thorough communication is what I'm getting at. So valuing efficiency without compromising clarity in communication. Example, addressing the need for concise yet comprehensive messages. So what they did here, that's why I wanted to read this bullet point first, and then we'll go to the last one. So what they're saying here is whenever I reach out and maybe I'm not as clear, this is where radical candor can come into play. So it's like, hey, do you have the Future of Work weekly report completed for this week? And then I might ask for more clarity. I might say, well, do you mean, do we have the recording completed, or do we have the editing completed, or do we have the description complete? You see how I can push back and ask for more clarity if I don't fully understand. And so, but then you might be listening to that. And I used to say this, and I still think it's true, is like, if you're having that back and forth, let's just pick up the phone and have that conversation, right? It's all different for different cultures. So think about that. But yes, be succinct, but be very clear with your communication and allow or create an environment that allows employees to ask you for more clarity. All right. The last one, we've made it. It's a little long. Sorry. I'm trying to make these short, but I get so into it. Action over perfection. So prioritizing responsiveness and substance over flawless communication, encouraging timely exchanges and collaborative efforts despite minor imperfections. So basically what they're saying is like progress is better than perfection. I think that was from Sheryl Sandberg. They've just changed it to say action over perfection. And what they're saying here, again, they're empowering their employees to get work done quickly. It doesn't have to be perfect, but let's move on a pace of speed to be a little bit more efficient, right? I mean, again, this one is a little bit tricky because type A personalities like myself, like I don't want to necessarily, I mean, I'm fine with giving a first draft and I would call that and label it as that. But again, you're asking some people to do something that they might not be fully comfortable with, but it all circles back to like in your interview process, you might want to tell them, you want to tell them about these 10 communication standards. And if they're good to go with that, then you're good to go. But what I would also say is you have to lead by example on this, because I know a type A person out there, right? If they're looking at this and they're saying that, hey, my manager is telling me to get it done, send it over, don't worry about it being perfect, we'll be fine. I can tell you, whether or not they've experienced this or not, they're going to say, oh, I made a typo or that number is wrong, I'm going to get fired, right? So you have to build that culture for these things to happen. And so that's the last bullet point, but I'll end on this, right? The point of this last part is to show you how one team can do it, working asynchronously, working 100% remote, working across 36 countries, and being able to do this properly and still have a successful business. The other side of the coin is This is adapted specifically to their culture. So what might work for them might not work for you. Take bits and pieces of it, but the main takeaway is to be clear about your communication, set clear expectations, and be thorough in your communications. That's what I took away from it. And with that, we have wrapped up another The Future of Work weekly report. This should be out on Wednesday. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoy these, definitely like and subscribe. It helps us get the reach out there to other Future of Work pioneers, and we just really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and we will see you on the next Future of Work weekly report.